Alright guys, welcome back to Strong Successful Mail. So for today, I'm going to go over an email that was sent from a subscriber. This from a guy, sounds like he's in his early 50s, and he shares his story from like 6 years ago, back in 2019 when he had to do jury duty, and his experiences in what he described as the feminized legal system. You're going to see the BS he deals with the district attorney. At the time, he believes she's like a 50-year-old woman. Looks like she was an old sorority girl who clearly was an effeminist and had people working under her, other ADAs and people in the prosecutor's office that were effeminists themselves, or clearly DEI hires, that type of thing, and it was a giant mess. And the thing about this guy is that he, at the time, and still is in private security, but he used to be in law enforcement, so he has experience in a lot of things, and he went to law school for a while before realizing it wasn't for him, but he did learn a few things in taking certain courses like constitutional law and things like that. So when they started pulling BS with him and the fellow jurors and they were trying to influence things, obviously he knew how to handle himself and it turned into a giant mess where he has the last laugh on these boneheads. And I'll be going to go over here, guys, making the point about, now we can talk about the legal system and a lot of crap that goes on there, and yes, the feminized legal system. And by the way, before I get into this, I got to say what he's going to describe in this video, his experience with some of these boneheads, doesn't surprise me, because I got a buddy who's been a criminal defense attorney, I think since 2007, and on the state level. And what he's told me about various assistant district attorneys he's dealt with and all that, and people in the prosecutor's office, it's just like this. No joke. And while they're not all this way, many are absolute, well, they don't quite deserve the job there, if you catch my drift, amongst many other things. So it doesn't surprise me at all. So it starts off, says here, Dear SSM, I've been with you since nearly the beginning. I've enjoyed how your channel has expanded to multiple channels, yet you still remain true to what has made you successful. Brother, I thank you for being with me all these years, and all you guys. I have a lot of stories that you will find quite interesting. I was raised blue pill by a proper Southern belle who had been small town royalty. I made a lot of mistakes with women before finding the R pill with Terrence Popp and Coach Greg Adams at age 47. Well, those are a couple of cool guys. Since becoming R pill is a process and not a straight line, upward trajectory, I've still made a few smaller mistakes with women since then. I also seem to have a knack for picking deranged or damaged females, so several of my experiences are my fault for not reading the signs. No, you were probably picking the best looking ones, and surprise, surprise, it was probably like the whole hot, crazy scale matrix type of thing. At the end of the day, guys are going to be drawn in like a tractor beam in Star Wars to the freaking hottest chicks in the room, and sadly, they usually have varying degrees of crazy. I also had consistent success with getting women despite my blue pill upbringing because I was, at the time, average. I was above average looks, a good athlete, and I was a good musician. As one of my lifelong friends says, you never had to chase them, they chased you. Yes, my old man was always around. He was a former chief petty officer in the U.S. Navy who had been an amateur boxer and ran a construction company after his retirement from the Navy. My brother and sister were a decade older, and I was a late life surprise. He was in his mid-40s when I was born, while my mother was a decade younger than him. My dad was tough as nails, but born in the early 1930s in the South. When it came to women, like most men of his generation, he was hopelessly blue-pilled and chivalrous. Well, I think that's kind of the culture, the Southern gentleman, that type of thing, even if he was tough as nails and born in the 1930s. Well, my R-pill journey began in 2018 thanks to creative output from those such as yourself as well as all the other guys. If you want to be able to tie all my stories, I'll eventually send you together in a single source. Call me Disco Duck. That's the name of the silly song from the 70s that actually became a #1 hit in 1976. I was 4 years old back then and I loved it. As an adult, it sounds like something only a 4-year-old would like. I don't know how it ever topped the charts, but I said the same about Achy Breaky Heart and Elvira. This first story I'm about to tell you took place right before COVID in late 2019, when I was called in for jury duty. Okay, here we go. We got some background about the guy, now we're getting into the jury duty story. I moved back to my hometown and was living with my parents while helping my mother be a caregiver for my father, who died a couple months after this story. I'm sorry about your dad, man. He had a nurse during the day, but my mom needed help lifting and moving him at night. On the weekends, my brother would come in from out of town to help out, giving me either a break or an opportunity to work my second job, depending on if I was needed for work. With both an education and law enforcement background, plus some time in law school, I was working days as a fraud investigator for a health insurance company, and on weekends, when my brother would take over at home, I would moonlight as an armed bodyguard for local corporate types, politicians, or visiting celebrities, including a senator on one occasion. Wow, dude, you're a fucking workaholic. I'm sure you have plenty of good stories about being a bodyguard for those people. Probably trumps this story. It was near the end of those few months back home that I was called in for jury duty. Well, that's interesting. Did that become your new registered address, and hence you were called for jury duty, or were you not that far? Or you were called for jury duty where you permanently lived, but it wasn't that far from your parents? But that doesn't matter. You got called in for jury duty nevertheless. I was fortunate that my company gave us our full pay for performing jury duty, so I really had no excuse not to do it. Wow, that's generous. At the first jury cattle call, most went in the main pool, where you might go after an entire month without even being called. After that first morning, you only needed to call in every morning to see if you were needed. The chances were good that you might go the entire month of your obligation and never have to go in. Or you could submit your name for the grand jury. If chosen, you would go in from 8 to 4 p.m. every day, Monday through Friday, and review cases submitted by various prosecutors to see if the defendants would be indicted and sent to trial. Since I didn't have to worry about the money due to my company's policy, I thought this sounded more interesting. Plus, I would rather know I had a regular schedule, even if it meant I was going in every day. I submitted my name, was chosen, and at our first grand jury meeting, I was voted the foreman due to my law enforcement and law school background. A previous Commonwealth attorney for our entire state once bragged to our local newspaper that he could get a grand jury to indict a ham sandwich. The arrogance of that always pissed me off. Yeah, that would piss me off too. Now, you said you're from the South, and you said Commonwealth. Is this Virginia? I think Virginia is a Commonwealth. I could be wrong. This is off the top of my head. When I addressed the grand jury the first time, I mentioned that quote and told them that I did not want us to be that kind of grand jury. We would look at the facts and make our own determination rather than be a rubber stamp. We had a good group of people, and everyone agreed to that. I also explained the doctrine of jury nullification, where even if something is technically illegal, a jury can refuse to prosecute or enter a finding of not guilty simply because they believe it to be a bad law. Huh. Is that true? I guess it's true. I didn't know that. I stated that I believed in this doctrine and intended to use it if necessary. Again, everybody agreed. Well, the Commonwealth's attorney for our county was a red-headed white woman about 50 years old. Okay, enter the feminist. She had a Native American last name, which I can only assume she married into. Oh, unless we got another Elizabeth Warren type. The other prosecutors were your stereotypical lineup of DEI hires. Here we go. It's no different than what my buddies dealt with in Massachusetts. There was one Asian female and only a couple of white guys who seemed very beta. We mostly dealt with the sorority types. In looking back, that was probably favoritism on the part of the Commonwealth attorney, since she looked like an over-the-hill sorority girl. For the first week, things went fine. The prosecutors seemed genuinely surprised at the number of cases that we declined to prosecute, mentioning that it was rare and odd not to indict every single case before us. Mission accomplished. Well, think about it from their perspective. Your average juror does not have a lot of this knowledge and probably figures they're supposed to do what the prosecutor's office says. I can kind of see how your average Joe would think that. Finally, on Thursday of the second week, we were facing a Medicaid fraud case against an elderly woman who had apparently overspent her allowances by about $10,000. From what was presented to us, it seemed an honest mistake. The woman was very frail, unable to pay back the money, and in the midst of a liver failure. Still, this tiny, blonde, very aggressive prosecutor was bound to see her on trial for a felony. That does not surprise me at all, because this female prosecutor probably saw blood in the water, easy prey, even though this is this little old lady who obviously you and the other individuals thought this was not, it was an accident, if you will, you know? She was going for the easy thing, the easy, an easy win. Or what she thought was an easy win. She was almost like a little chihuahua in a miniskirt. After this incident, I thought of her privately as the ankle biter. In violation of the law, ethics, and protocol, she came charging into the grand jury room while we were in deliberations over another case, demanding to know why we didn't indict her case, raging that she had spent nearly 2 years getting it ready for prosecution. Yeah, right. There's no way she spent 2 years of her time, day and night, getting it ready for prosecution. That's bullshit. And she's not supposed to be barging in when you're doing this stuff and influencing you. Everybody was shocked. One of the women on the grand jury stammered that we didn't believe it was just prosecution, to which the ankle biter responded that it wasn't for us to make that call. Uh-oh. Looks like the 50-year-old former sorority girl effinist. She feels like her power is being challenged. By now, I was over my shock and was getting pretty pissed off. I told her that it was exactly our job to make that call. She was out of order by just barging into our room, which was a big no-no. Grand juries are supposed to be independent of any outside coercion or influence. I politely said that I understood her frustration, but she needed to leave and close the door behind her. Yeah, I'm sure that went over real well with her. By the time we left for the day, one of the other prosecutors, clearly one of the DEI guys, was there to confront us in the hallway. He said he was there on behalf of his colleague, the ankle biter, to find out what we thought we were doing. I responded that it was none of his business and to just walk away. One of the other jury members mumbled something about jury nullification, and the prosecutor said that it was illegal, and I responded that it wasn't. Okay, now to this individual who works for Miss Anklebiter here, obviously he's an ADA or something like that. She's obviously the top dog there. This guy works under her. She probably carefully chose this guy as one of her DEI hires. He thinks you're just some average Joe doesn't know what the fuck you're talking about. And let's be honest, most people wouldn't know these things. And he's probably feeling pretty high and mighty in his job. He then asked me where I got my law degree. I responded that I had passed constitutional law and criminal law while I did attend law school, and as well as practice and procedure at the same law school that he apparently attended, getting a 98% in one and 99% in the other. Okay, that's a high scores. I then asked him what his grade was in each of those classes, and yeah, he got pissed off. I'm sure he did. He said he would be looking into charging some of us or all of us with contempt. I told him to do his best, but for now, get the fuck out of my way. Well, I'm sure that rattled the other members of the jury and the grand jury about that. They don't know. Nobody likes being threatened, being prosecuted, charged with contempt. Well, don't worry, guys. We're getting to some good stuff here. Well, he says, side note here, I'd done my research on the entire prosecutor's office and landing on the grand jury. I knew where all of them had gotten their undergraduate degrees, law degrees, plus the other graduate degrees a few of them received before going to law school. Damn, dude. Well, he was quite out of line, but it had the desired effect. The grand jury was now scared to death of the prosecutors. That was his intention. Friday went by, and everyone was rubber stamping everything put in front of us. It took 8 votes out of 12 of us to indict in just about everything that was 11-1 or 10-2 in favor of the prosecution. He says, to quote Bugs Bunny, this of course meant war. That weekend, I paid a visit to the father of a friend of mine from high school. He was once a well-respected local civil rights attorney. He was now 85 years old and long since retired. I told him everything and asked for some guidance. He agreed that the prosecutors were out of order and that, sadly, this was quite common. He further explained that to ensure security and privacy, the grand jury room and the prosecutor's offices were on the top floor of one of our 2 courthouses and way in the back of the building. Unfortunately, this also led to a lack of oversight, which provided for cronyism and other shenanigans. He told me that the grand juries were scared in their independence and that the only one in danger of a contempt charge was that bonehead trying to white knight for his ankle-biting colleague. Well, he instructed me to go see the supervising judge in his office, which opened an hour before our report time. Oh boy, this is going to be interesting. I should introduce myself as the foreman of the current grand jury and tell him everything. I was told the judge was a good and honest man and would not tolerate the types of things which these people had obviously gotten far too comfortable doing. I did as he instructed. About 2 hours into our Monday morning duties, 3 hours after I met with the supervising judge, a bailiff came and ordered us to the supervising judge's courtroom, where His Honor instructed us to sit in the jury box. The judge then called all the prosecutors, all of them, to the courtroom and had them sit in the audience. Finally, the Commonwealth's attorney was summoned to stand before the bench. This is the 50-year-old chick. The judge was in his robes. He was very stern and obviously not fucking around. I took a moment to wonder just what I had set in motion and if I had gone too far. And I won't lie, I knew I hadn't done anything wrong, but even I was intimidated, shit had gotten real. Yeah, don't mess with judges. So he began to chew out the Commonwealth's attorney, talking about how they had a high duty to be transparent and ethical. He further went on that it looked like on his watch that she had formed a little club that would do her bidding and that bordered on some kind of cult. I bet they were all shitting their pants there. When His Honor asked her if she had anything to say for herself, this 50-year-old take-charge, ball-busting boss babe immediately set women back in the workplace at least 75 years by bursting into tears. Of course, the age-old tactic since they're little girls, bust into tears when they're in trouble to get out of, being accountable and all that. He says it was straight out of the Hobag handbook. She even said, and I quote, she was so sorry. Of course she said that. She then had to turn to the jury box and apologize to each and every one of us, while admitting that her prosecutors had been out of line and that things would change beginning immediately. After that, the judge thanked us for our service, apologized again on behalf of the prosecutors, and dismissed us. Dude, that's hilarious. Fucking funny, man. Good job for you having the balls to do that. But again, if you didn't have the knowledge of these things, that wouldn't have happened. Working with the prosecutors for the final 2 weeks was a little awkward, as you can imagine, but I didn't give a fuck. They were wrong, criminally wrong, and we all knew it. Well, good for you, man. Unfortunately, some intimidation had stuck. Cases that we would have no-billed previously often went to indictment on votes of 8-4 or 9-3. You could see the lingering fear in the eyes of some of the jurors, especially the women. It certainly made me even more skeptical about any case I've ever seen where a defendant was indicted and a trial date was set. Again, this makes me think of a lot of the stories my friends told me over the years. The guy who threatened me with the contempt did make some inconsequential smart-ass remark to me as I was leaving on the final day. I smiled and told him that he would be my new hobby for the rest of my life. If I saw that he was involved in any, and I do mean any case in which his name appeared in the news, I would immediately offer my testimony and services to the opposing counsel. I also told him I'd be making a complaint against him to the Bar Association since witnesses would not be a problem. I did, and he received a reprimand, though he wasn't suspended or disbarred. I didn't think he was going to get disbarred. There are many lessons to be learned about our legal system here. A feminist with an axe to grind, filling her prosecutor's office with fellow feminists, cuck fellow travelers, and DEI hires. Some of them overlap, I know. How you can often only get the level of justice you can afford, the list goes on and on. As for my takeaway from all this, I would urge all you to avoid entangling yourself in the criminal justice system if you possibly can. No wonder so many innocent people are convicted and go to prison. Well, here at the end of the day, you get jury duty, you gotta fucking go. You can get summoned for jury duty, and then, then they can simply dismiss you, but if you get summoned and you gotta go, and they want you, then you gotta fucking do it and deal with this shit. He says, this is Disco Duck signing off. Stay tuned for some interesting stories from my sometimes disastrous, always hilarious dating history. He also says, attached here is my letter of acknowledgement from the Commonwealth's attorney for serving of the grand jury. And he attached the letter, a picture of the letter he got, thanking him for his service and all that. It's pretty funny considering what happened. So anyhow, guys, there you go. A little legal story for you about how things go behind the scenes. Now, does this mean that it's always this way? No, but, I mean, what a freaking mess. But overzealous prosecutor's office. And of course, it all really triggered. It all got started with the whole old lady, and I'm going to believe didn't do that on purpose, with the whole, overspending on the Medicaid stuff or Medicare, whatever the fuck it was, and this guy standing up for her, and this high and mighty prosecutor with all her DEI hires trying to make their lives a living hell, intimidating them. So good for you for standing up, and I'm glad she got put in her place. But I'm willing to bet you she's probably back to her old tricks with the next people she was dealing with the next month. But there you go, guys, an example of our legal system. And I'm curious, any lawyers might chime in here, any cops that have dealt with this type of bullshit. So there you go. And sir, by the way, a good story. And if you got stories from your personal life, dating and relationships and everything, train wrecks, things you've learned, send it in. We'll be good to go over it. All right, guys, that's it for today. Be sure to comment down below. Let me know what you think about this. Be sure to like the video, share it with your friends, and subscribe. I'll catch you next time.